The anti-Semitic threats targeting our Jewish community and community centers are horrible and are painful and a very sad reminder of the work that still must be done to root out hate and prejudice and evil.
Welcome back to the road to City Hall. That was President Trump speaking out yesterday against an alarming rise in anti-Semitic incidents around the country following a pattern that we saw during the presidential election. That was followed today by a visit by Vice President Mike Pence to a Jewish cemetery in Missouri that had been vandalized. Now, these incidents have Jewish communities on edge around the country, including here in New York City, where just today the headquarters of the Anti-Defamation League received an anonymous bomb threat. We've got a special panel here tonight to talk more about this. Jane Eisner is the editor-in-chief of The Forward. Yair Rosenberg is a senior writer at Tablet Magazine. And Evan Bernstein is the New York Regional Director for the Anti-Defamation League. Thank you all for being here. And let me start with you, Evan. The threat came in what form, and what did you have to do today?
Late in the morning, we received a phone call that had a robotic-type voice to it that it was a bomb threat to the ADL. We have our regional office and our national office in the building, and thank God we have a really great protocol. We haven't had a bomb threat in many, many years, but the protocol is there, and we follow the protocol beautifully. We have tremendous internal security at the ADL, our building security, and our great relationship with the NYPD. Everything worked in perfect synergy, and they were able to come in and find out that it wasn't real, that it was a fake bomb threat. But the threat was there. Our staff was affected. Some people left the office, some people stayed in, but no one comes to work expecting to have to get a bomb threat and deal with that. And for some people, it was an incredibly emotional day and very difficult.
And so this comes at the as the latest installment in a story that is in part ancient, but is also something that has been documented over the last year. We saw this throughout the campaign. You wrote about it quite eloquently, that there are elements of haters out there who felt, for whatever reason, that now was a moment that they could safely come forward.
Yeah, we saw it a lot during the campaign. We saw it especially on social media. We saw it directed at particularly Jewish journalists. We saw Nazi imagery, anti-Semitic slogans, various other stuff that was always there and that we've always known is there and that statistics show was always there, but it was becoming more vocal and it was coalescing around, in some sense, Donald Trump, which led to lots of calls for him to address it, which he has sort of alternatively done and not done in a very sporadic fashion.
I don't want to jump ahead of your next editorial, but what is the sense of The Forward of whether it's enough, forceful enough, too little, too late? What do you make of this?
I think it's too early to tell whether or not this is going to be real. The president said the right things yesterday. He said it at the right place, tying what's going on against Jews to other bigotry and forms of racism that the United States is experiencing. But now it's going to be really important for him to follow up. Will there be a Justice Department investigation of the desecration in the cemetery in St. Louis and other things that have happened? Will there be policies that don't engender hatred of the other? Because it's really a piece. You can't just see this as a set of isolated incidents. I think it is something that is unfortunately happening in the country. I don't think that it's caused by the president, but it certainly was enabled by his campaign.
When you mention the policies, what is it about the policies, the tone, or whatever went on during the campaign and in this young administration that you think encourages, empowers, or is some kind of a coded message to anti-Semitic people?
Well, first, to echo what Yair said, I think candidate Trump passed up several times when he should have decried anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry. But then you look at the broader picture. I mean, when you target Muslims, when you target Mexicans, when you target judges because of their background, then that indicates that there is a kind of social permission that the president granted for the folks who were maybe always there, but certainly we haven't heard from them in this kind of way. I've been a journalist for a really long time. I've certainly been criticized by lots of people on the right and the left, but never with this kind of really virulent Holocaust imagery coming after after myself personally and after my colleagues as Jews.
Is some of that a function of distance, do you think, Yair? Meaning, many of the people in the alt-right, I mean, I don't want to call any names, but clearly they're not old enough to have experienced the horrors of not only the war, but the immediate post-war, the discovery of the full depth of the savagery of the Holocaust and so forth.
So I would say it has something to do with distance, but I would say less distance from the events and more distance from the people that they're harassing, attacking, because this is like the first real social media election. Obama, in some sense, pioneered it, but it's now become a part of the landscape. But what the internet enables people, especially under anonymity on platforms like Twitter, where your identity is unverified, is it enables people to be incredibly vitriolic, to say hateful things, whether they believe because they believe them, or to get a rise out of people, or to try to intimidate them. And so what we're seeing is sort of what social media can lead to in a negative sense. It can do wonderful positive things for politics and political discourse, but it can also allow people who are far from the subjects that they're attacking to sort of feel that this is okay, and to not quite really grasp, right, how cruel what they're doing is.
Right.
And so I think we're seeing some of that. I don't think every single person involved in this quite realizes what they're doing. And I also think that some of them are taking advantage of the fact that no one can identify them and know what they are doing exactly, but before they couldn't do it.
And of course, in an open society, we have this tightrope you have to walk, right? You don't want to suppress speech. On the other hand, you don't want to encourage hate speech. You can't even necessarily find out where it's coming from. And then you also have this added sort of political dimension that I know you deal with, probably every day, which is that you're talking about defending the rights of a minority in a much larger country where people can find it easy to be indifferent or sort of vaguely hostile or otherwise sort of disperse your concerns.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to defend a minority group as small as the Jewish people, for sure. And I think, sometimes, and I think one of the biggest canards is that we have a much larger population than we actually do. At the ADL, we support all minority groups. So it's not only, defending the rights of the Jewish people, but securing justice and fair treatment for all, and putting that collective together, that number grows, and it's something that we try to partner as much as we can, because there's strength in numbers, and we try to stand with our brothers and sisters that are minorities that are feeling, just this unbelievable amount of hate that's come out, since the election. Because it's not just the Jewish people; it's been a lot of other groups too that have been feeling this, and our partners are telling us.
And for perspective, how many Jews are there in the United States? What's the number you would use?
I think it's about 6 million.
It's about 6 million, less than 2% of the population.
Right. I mean, we forget that easily here in New York, right? Because that's not our reality. But then, I mean, when I read about, and we talked about this horrible situation in a place called Whitefish, Montana, where Nazis were planning an armed march. It doesn't seem to have amounted to much, but what a chilling, sort of horrible thing that a minority would feel especially defenseless to defend against, right?
Yeah, I think those are the ones that are the more public, things. The things there's a lot of press there. There's a lot of organizations around the country that got involved with that. The things that concern us are the things that are not being reported, and the things that are happening with a lot of young people. We've seen a lot of incidents, not only anti-Semitic incidents, towards young people that are under the age of 18. We were getting a rampant amount of calls on bullying because of people's color of their skin or their religion. So it's the challenge is there are more public things, which is what you saw in Whitefish, and the kind of the public alt-right, public kind of Ku Klux Klan type of things. There's a lot of things that are happening that are much more granular, smaller, within the communities that are affecting people at a very deep level, and that's really concerning to us.
Is it asking too much to insist, demand, request that the president do more than that sort of passively phrased statement that we saw, saying, "Oh, this is painful, this is terrible"? On issues that he cares about, he says, "I alone can fix it. I'm going to give us 4% growth. I'm going to rewrite all the trade deals. I'm going to, I'm going to destroy ISIS and eradicate them from the face of the earth." Comes to anti-Semitism, it's late. It's kind of mumbly, and it's kind of like, boy, that sure is horrible. Somebody ought to do something about it.
Oh, I don't think it's too much to ask him if He can't fix it on his own, but he can't fix the economy and our foreign affairs either. I mean, that's the point of this. But he has an absolute obligation, not just an opportunity, an obligation to address this kind of bigotry and all kind of bigotry. But he also has to walk the walk. I mean, part of the problem here is that we're still seeing, even with the new immigration orders yesterday, an administration that does seem intent on targeting certain kinds of people, blaming certain kinds of people for the ills of our country, instead of saying, like, yes, these problems exist, but there's many reasons for them, and we have to work together to solve them.
And is that your take on it as well? I mean, the bus starts rolling of intolerance, right? And it really picks up a lot of passengers. It picks up the black passengers and the Jewish passengers and the Muslim passengers, and the train starts picking up momentum.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that Trump is going to have to overcome, or he won't, and he'll be judged by it, is whether he can start responding to prejudice in America and prejudice that coalesces around his campaign without seeing it as a personal attack on him, because very often he seems to respond to questions about anti-Semitism. We saw this when he was questioned by a Jewish reporter about rising anti-Semitism that wasn't saying he was anti-Semitic, but he took it as a question saying, you're anti-Semitic, and he takes it as something that he has to go on the defensive about, and then it's like pulling teeth to get him to defend this prejudice, because he feels like he's somehow condemning himself, that he's somehow affirming an attack on him. But what he really is the president of America, and as he says, of all Americans, which means he needs to defend all Americans. And when he transitions out of candidate mode into president mode, that's what it involves. I mean, he still hasn't done it yet.
I mean, the fact that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is prominent in the Jewish community, is apparently a man of faith and lives that faith, and you know, his daughter now and his grandchildren are Jewish and so forth. Does that change the equation at all?
Well, I think that he likes to use that as a way of saying, I am inoculated against this. I don't think the man is an anti-Semite. I am sure he loves his Jewish grandchildren. I am sure he loves his Jewish friends and his children. That's not the question here, though. It isn't, as you said, about him. It's about his speech, the way he targets people because of their race or religion or where they came from, and the policies that he is promoting. That's the root of it. It isn't about his own predilections. We can put that aside. I'm not here to judge him at all. But he does have a responsibility for both the discourse that he's engendering and the policies that he's pursuing.
Okay, well, the conversation's going in a different direction. We can all be grateful for that. Thank you all so much for coming by tonight.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break now. Straight ahead in the political rundown, Curtis Lewa and Herson Barrero weigh in on Republican candidate for Mayor Paul Massey's rocky first press conference. We're back in a minute.